Hey everyone, Corporate Hiker Guy here with you. Have you ever thought how awesome would it be to have a dream piece of property? A peaceful, quiet place that you could escape to, relax, and enjoy the great outdoors. Well, today I'm going to show you the step-by-step process that I used to find my wife and I's dream property out in Colorado. So we'll actually transport out to the land in Colorado. You can see the mountains in the background there. Where I'll share some details with you about how much we paid, how big it is, what we liked about it, what we didn't like about some other properties out there, and then also give you some tips that may help with your property search. And then at the end of the video, I'll share with you what I believe is the number one most important thing to consider when buying your dream property. And as an added bonus, I'll share with you a sleeper pick on where in the US that you can start your property search. So with that, we'll move over to my computer and I'll start showing you the process that I used. So let's get started.
Hi, I'm on my computer now. So I'm going to show you the process that we use to find our dream property. The first step was setting up the initial search criteria. So I've got a slide here I'll show. Feel free to pause this and take a picture. So this just helped. These are broad search criteria categories that just help me locate which part of the country and which areas that may be good for us. So once those search criteria are set up, the next step will be to go over to Google Maps. And so I just typed in USA, Google Maps, map of the country comes up, and then I just start zooming in. And you can see as I zoom in here, you start seeing some of the cities and towns populating. And one of the search criteria for us was to be a direct flight from the Atlanta airport. So, and then I wanted the property to be within a 3-hour drive of that destination airport. So using that, I just started on the West Coast and starting, marching east. So, like we'll take one example, we'll use Idaho. And just zoom in a little bit. Again, as we zoom in, as you can see, some of the towns and cities start to populate here. There's one area I wanted to show you up here in northern Idaho, and that's Sandpoint, Idaho. You zoom in a little bit. So you can see Sandpoint here, just on the lake there. So if you say, hey, using your search criteria, you start looking at different areas. So, hey, maybe Sandpoint, Idaho would be an area that we could look in. So the next step would be moving over to Zillow and then just type in that area, Sandpoint, Idaho. And then you can see here the map with the properties on the left, and on the right are the individual listings with some pictures. I'm not going to give a tutorial Zillow, but I am going to show you a few things that I did in Zillow that helped with my property search. And the first was up here on this bar. So I clicked this block, and just make sure that you uncheck houses and townhomes. That's not what we're looking for. And the only thing is checked here is this lots and land. Then here, done. And so then what you'll have are these red dots, and they are, properties that are for sale, lots that are for sale. But one of the things I do is you can see here that the only thing that's listed here is inside the city limits of Sandpoint. So one of the things I do is click this remove boundary button. So click that, and it'll start populating outside the city limits, which is most likely where you're going to be. I mean, we wanted to be out in the woods. So, and the other thing I do here in Zillow is over here on the right-hand side, I click the sort by, and I think the default is newest, but I click price low to high. and let it sort here on the right side, and it'll start with properties that are lowest price and go to high. So here on the left, if you hover over one of these red dots, it'll show the price of the property, a little thumbnail. And so you just start looking around. Now, using this sort by low to high, you can quickly see if that's an area that you can afford. And so using that, you can quickly move from area to area to see, hey, if that's an area that you can afford, if it meets your search criteria. So that's the process I use. And again, I just took some time and just searched across the US in areas that met my initial search criteria. And I started narrowing down some potential areas that we could buy in. And so the area I ended up settling in was near Canyon City, Colorado. So I'll pull up Canyon City, Colorado. And again, I'll hit this remove boundary button. I've got my sort over here on low to high. So you can see, you can get an idea where this is. Now they've got, here's some lots for sale. Here's a 2-acre lot for $10,000. So, you may say, hey, that's an area that I can afford. It meets my other search criteria. So using that process, you can narrow down a couple of areas in the US that you may want to be in. So once you do that, I would go over to the detailed search criteria. So I'll move back over to my slides. And again, feel free to pause and take a picture of this. But then once you identify the area you want to be in, you want to start looking for some specific properties in Zillow. And so these are some of the search criteria that my wife and I set up. I'll mention just a couple of them to you. So the third one down there, the property could be sloped, but some portion level. So hey, in your search, you're going to find a lot of sloped properties. In fact, if you find a property that's a lot lower price than the properties around it, guess what? That property is sloped. But that doesn't mean that you should necessarily rule it out. I mean, if there's some portion of that property, this level, that you can maybe get a camper on, or eventually an off-grid cabin, or just hang out in, then that may work for you. And one of the things I used was Google Earth. So I'd put the address in Google Earth, search, and you could see the contour of the land and see if there was a portion of it that was level. So another search criteria I'll bring out here is no weird neighbors. So I'll tell you a quick story. There was a piece of property that my wife and I were very interested in. I was out on the property looking at it. The neighbor was driving down the road, and I went out and flagged down the neighbor and said hello, introduced myself as someone that may be buying the property. And then I was asking about an ATV trail that was kind of near the property line of between the two properties. And he said, yeah, I built that ATV trail. And I said, well, I pointed out there was a property stake there, and it looked like the trail was over here. And he said, no, that trail's on my side. That's not really the property stake. Well, it turned out the guy was lying about that. I mean, it was enough that he had built an ATV trail on this property, but to lie about it, I mean, hey, that was a red flag for us. So we just passed on that property. So if you're able to meet the neighbors, that would be a good thing. And one other thing on this list is if you can go out to the property, maybe in the morning, in the afternoon, just different types of day, and just listen. Just listen and see if there's any dogs barking. I mean, if there's a dog barking all day long nearby your property, that's going to be a problem. So that's the detailed search criteria. We'll move back to Zillow here. So once you find, again, the area that you want to be in, you start finding some properties that meet your detailed search criteria. At that point, you want to reach out to a local realtor. And I just went on Google and typed best realtor in Canyon City. And I just reached out to her by email. I included a couple of the properties that I had found on Zillow, and she set me up with some additional properties. And I just took a trip out, just flew out there and looked at some properties. I mean, eventually, you're going to need to put some boots on the ground and actually be out there and look at the properties. And I kind of, I enjoy doing that. I'd kind of make it a challenge for these trips to do it real cheap. I'd do a cheap Airbnb, I'd fly Spirit Airlines, and I'd just fly out there, look at properties for a couple days, and then fly back. And I really enjoyed it. So yeah, just try to enjoy the process. But I definitely recommend once you find the areas and some engaging with the local realtor. That was real key for us. And the other thing I would recommend to you is just to try to enjoy the process. I mean, it took us a while to find our property. We probably looked for a year, but it was worth it. In the end, we found the right property for us that met our criteria. Once I found a couple properties I really thought would work, then I took my wife out and she looked at the properties. So yeah, I encourage you. To use this process to find your dream property, it's out there waiting to be found. So, with that, I thought I'd move over to our property in Colorado and give you a tour of the property.
One of the things that we love is just the peace and quiet out here. We live in the Atlanta area and a lot of traffic, a lot of noise. But out here it's just peaceful and quiet. Just listen. So it's so nice. We come out here, my wife and I mean, we just immediately go into a relaxed state, and we do work out here, but it's so enjoyable to come out. So I'll tell you a few things about our property. So it's 38 acres. It kind of runs northeast, southwest. The top part of the property is kind of elevated, and that's one of the things that we liked about it because it gives us a great view of the mountains and then looking down into the valley. The other thing we liked about this property was even though parts of it are sloped, but the middle part of the property, there's kind of a finger of land that goes out in the middle that's flat. And that's something you want to think about when you're looking at properties, because you'll see a lot of sloped properties for sale, and that's fine as long as there's some flat land, because you want to think about where you're going to set up your camper or where you're eventually going to build your cabin, and you want to have some flat land for that. The other thing is the 38 acres. When we started looking, I really didn't think I needed 38 acres. I mean, what would I do with 38 acres, all that land? But what I found, because we looked at some other properties that were 5 or 6 acres, is that 5 acres seems like a lot, but if you're building on one side of that 5 acres and then your neighbor is building next to you, now you've got noise, now you've got a neighbor right there. So what the 38 acres does is it provides a buffer. That's really what it is. Not that you can't find that buffer in a 5-acre property, but you really have to pay attention to where your neighbors are or where your neighbors could build. So we paid just under $100,000 for the land. It was listed for $112,000. Let's see, the property taxes out here are $15 a year, which is pretty amazing. And we pay quite a bit more of that property taxes in Atlanta. But out here, this is on agricultural land, so the taxes are really low. Even, God willing, one day when we put a house out here, an off-grid cabin, the taxes will be less than $1,000. So that's something we liked out here. So with that, let's take a walk and I'll show you a couple features that we liked about the land. Hey, another feature I wanted to show you of our property is this homestead here. Let's walk over here and take a look. See this old cabin here. This cabin we think dates back to the 1800s. There's a few other cabins just down the way here, not on our property, but down close to the road. And the locals know that that was an old mining community. and even had a stagecoach stop there that came in from Colorado Springs. So those kind of cabins are in the same condition as this. So I think this was also from the 1800s. So really cool whole thing here. We'll check it out. Inside, there's an old stove there that probably this was used throughout the 1900s. Probably these are probably from like the 30s or 40s. You can see somebody did some concrete chinking here. So yeah, kind of cool to think about who may have lived here and kind of the life they lived here. I mean, this is remote today. Can you imagine how remote it was back in the 1800s or even early 1900s? There's no dry creek bed right there. That was probably flowing water. So you get their water right there. And, you know, bring in some dry goods and hunt some deer or elk, and you can make a go of it. Another thing I wanted to show you here that may help you with your property search is the property pins. So there should be 4 survey property pins at each corner of your property. And I'll show you what the pins look like. So you can see that stake there, but you can see the pin in the ground. So that's the official surveyor's pin. And you definitely want to find those pins to mark the corners of your property. Now, nothing is marked between the pins. So what we did is we just walked. I took a bearing on my phone and walked and put some ribbons out so we knew where our property line is. But you definitely want to find the property pins. That's important. You know, if a realtor or neighbor says, "Oh, don't worry about it, you know, that corner over there next to the tree, that's your property line." If there's no pins, I wouldn't take their word for it. Go ahead and hire a surveyor, have them put the pins out. You know, first thing you know, you're arguing with your neighbor about the property line. So did want to show you that. I just wanted to show you a final view here. You can see the mountains in the background there. It's actually 30 alpine lakes up in those mountains and some great hiking trails to get to them. Really good trout fishing. So for those of you that follow my Corporate Hiker Guy channel know I love to backpack and hike. So I'm really looking forward to tackling some of those. Well, hey, hope you've enjoyed the tour today. I've really enjoyed showing you the property. Take care. So hey, to finish up today, I'd like to share with you what I believe is the #1 most important thing to consider when looking for your dream property. And that is to meet some of the locals. Whether it be through a church group, a local restaurant, a community group, or a festival, I encourage you to meet some locals. It's amazing the conversations that you can strike up just by saying hi, hello, and introducing yourself. And just being able to ask some questions about the area, let them know that you're looking for land in the area. That will be very helpful for you. We were very fortunate to find several people in the local area, but one guy in particular that we met was so helpful. He kind of knew the area where our property was. He was aware of the water situation on either side of our land. So that was very helpful for us. So that's something I would definitely recommend that you do, is meet a local. The other thing I mentioned earlier in the video was a sleeper pick on where to start looking in the U.S. And that area is the Sandpoint, Idaho area. And that's the area I actually used earlier in this video when I was on my computer. I follow a homestead guy, Martin Johnson, on YouTube that's in that area. I also know another family that's in that area. It's just a great area. So that's some place that you could start your property search. It didn't quite meet our search criteria, but if it meets yours, that's a great area. And also, there's still some great properties in Colorado as well. So, hey, with that, I just want to encourage you in your property search. You know, my wife and I, we have just so much enjoyed our property out in Colorado. And I know that your property, it's out there waiting to be found. So I wish you the very best. And if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. And with that, thank you and God bless.